Hi, it's Judy from Bungalow Quilting and Yarn, and we're going to talk about making table napkins or cocktail napkins. The concept is going to be the same. I had posted something on Instagram and on Facebook with some cocktail napkins that I had made, and I had a lot of people asking me how I did that. And so I'm going to show you because it's super simple and it's really fun. We're going to actually, though, this time use a panel, and the panel is by Robert Kaufman. It's just a beautiful piece, and a lot of times people have panels and they don't know what to do with them. They bought them because they thought they were cute, and they're like, oh, geez, I don't really know what I'm going to do with this. So you can see that these are rectangles on this panel, and a lot of times when you get a panel, it's not perfectly square. The image isn't perfectly square. This has got a little sparkle in it. It's holiday, but it's not so holiday that you couldn't use it for other times of the year. The other thing I want to mention is that napkins come in different sizes, obviously, whether you're making a cocktail napkin or you're making a luncheon napkin or you're making a dinner napkin. And there is a website out there. All you have to do is Google different sizes of napkins, and it'll talk to you about what different sizes are recommended for what type of function that you're having. So cloth napkins are wonderful. They're washable, they're easily washed, they're easily dryable. You're not just wiping your mouth once with it and throwing it away, and that's why I always advocate to customers to think about, if you've got a fabric that you really particularly love, making some cloth napkins. So what I did with this one is I had to find the width of this, because that's obviously smaller than the length of this. And so you can't, in order to square it up, you're going to have to use the width. And once I measured it out, I decided to cut these 10 by 10. You're going to lose either a little bit up here or you're going to lose a little down here, and it just depends on your image. Now, I squared up this one by cutting a little off of both ends. I cut a little off of the bottom and a little off the top to make it 10 by 10. With the one with the little fox baby sitting here, you're probably going to choose to cut off the most of it up here because you're just going to lose some of the branches, but you don't really want to lose that fox. So when you decide how big you're going to make it, it's not a bad idea to make a template. Now this, because I decided I was doing these 10 by 10, I thought, well, layer cakes are 10 by 10. So we took the back piece of cardboard from one of the layer cakes that we had opened for another reason. And so you're going to lay it down on top and just cut around it. So I'm using this old-fashioned idea to cut something because we don't use cardboard templates anymore, do we? So now I'm going to cut my next one 10 by 10. And here's a little deer, and there's a lot of snow on the bottom here, so I think I'm going to choose to cut it further down here to square it up. Now, I'm not going to take my rotary cutter and cut right against the cardboard, because that way I'm going to be cutting the cardboard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my ruler on top of the cardboard, and then I'm going to be cutting up against my ruler. So I'm going to square this to 10 by 10. Turn it around. Lay my ruler against here. Cut it. Turn it again. You could do this with any piece of paper. Cut a piece of paper to 10 by 10. Lay it on your image, and then cut around it with your ruler. This is a really good idea, like I said, to use up some of those panels. Because panels, I know so many people are so into modern quilting right now, and we are a modern quilt shop at Bungalow. But we still do order panels because there are so many great uses, and they're so cute. And I don't typically make panel quilts. I usually choose to use the panels to make other things. All right, so I've got this one squared up 10 by 10. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to square up all of our other ones to 10 by 10. Okay, so now I've got all my panel pieces cut to 10 by 10. And I want the backing of the napkin to come around to the front. So, and I want the corner to be mitered. So this is how we accomplish that. So you pick out a pattern, or not a pattern, you pick out a fabric for your back. And if you want it to come in an inch around on each side, you're going to have to cut, so this was 10 by 10, this gets cut to 12 by 12 because you want an inch here and an inch here, here, and here. So this is 2 extra inches. So if this is 10 by 10, this is 12 by 12. Similarly, if you want an 18-inch by 18-inch napkin, you're going to have to cut your backing 20 inches by 20-inch square. Okay, so choose something that is going to look really nice on the opposite side. This is another piece by Kaufman that we have in the shop. The panel is by Robert Kaufman Fabrics. So I then lay this down on the center. Measure all around so that there's 1 inch on all sides. Center it, and then draw with a pen a corner around each corner that's here. Draw a corner here, draw a corner here, draw a corner here, and here. Then you're going to take your, and coincidentally, when I'm showing you this, this is also the way that you can do those cuddle blankets, where this side of the blanket is a piece of cuddle, and then the backing is a different color, a coordinating piece of cuddle, and it comes around to the front. So this is a valuable thing to know, because it doesn't just stop at doing this for napkins. You can do this for little baby blankets and even little baby taggy kind of things that they hold. So now we've got our corners drawn, and I'm going to take the 45-degree angle on my quilting ruler, and I'm going to put it along the edge, the top edge of this napkin front. And I'm going to lay that around the corner there, where I've got my corner marked. And I'm going to line that up with the top of the napkin, that 45-degree angle. And this piece, the edge of the ruler here, stops at the tip of the point of the napkin front, and I draw a 45-degree line. And I'm going to go around and draw the 45-degree line on every single corner. And then after that, I'm going to be ready to take this back to the sewing machine. So I'm drawing a 45-degree line. If this were a blanket, it would be a lot bigger. The other thing I want to say is, if this is a cocktail napkin, I think you would want to put some interfacing, woven fusible, on the back of the napkin front, because it's just going to give it a little bit more, substance. So if somebody's holding that drink in their hand with the cocktail underneath, or the cocktail napkin underneath that drink, it gives it a little more substance, and if the glass is sweating, it doesn't go right through the napkin so easily. So if this were to be a cocktail napkin and you were making it 7 by 7 or whatever, put a little bit of interfacing in there. Okay, so now we've got all 4 of our corners marked, and we're going to go back to the sewing machine. Okay, so you can see where I've made my markings, and this is the right side, this is the wrong side. So this is going to be the inside, and then the napkin is going to lay inside here. So when I'm going to fold this right sides together along the point here, I'm going to match up those 45-degree angle drawings that I did. I'm going to match those up, and then I'm going to place a pin in there, like that. And I'm going to sew from the corner. Make sure that your edges here are matched up and that they're straight. All right. So I'm going to sew from the corner. You can backstitch maybe 1 or 2 stitches. And then stop before you get to this edge. Don't stitch all the way off the edge. Stop about 1/8 of an inch away from your edge. You can backstitch maybe 1 or 2 stitches there. We're going to do that on all 4 corners. Now we're going to go to this corner and do this next. Okay, so now I have sewn from that inside fold along, and I've stopped a ways away from that end, and I'm going to trim this now. I've trimmed all the other corners. I'm going to trim this one about 1/4 inch away from the stitching, and then just a tiny little snip. Be really careful not to cut your stitching. A tiny little snip in the corner. And then we're going to turn this right sides out and very gently poke out those corners. Just gently poke out those corners so that you don't make a hole. So poke those corners all the way out. Now if this were a cuddle blanket, you would leave this edge raw, and you would just serpentine stitch over it once you put the inside piece in there. But it's not, it's a napkin. It's going to be washed over and over. So we're going to talk about how we're going to turn those edges under. But then we're going to stick our napkin front back inside. So we're going to do that over on the ironing board. Okay, so now I've put my 10 by 10 inch square of napkin back inside the edge, or inside the outside of the napkin, inside the back of the napkin. So we've tucked it up inside there. And then these edges are mitered perfectly. See that? Because we turned them right sides out. And I'm going to give that a shot with the iron. Now, be careful to turn those seam allowances one direction inside there, because if they're twisted, they're going to look lumpy and funny. So, you know, use your little turning bodkin or your little rubber or wooden skewer like I had and push those in one direction. Go all the way around this. Now, I suppose you could make the argument that you could zigzag this, but it's just not going to look as nice as if that's turned under. So we're gonna, like I said, if this were a minky blanket, because they're made in the exact same way, this edge would not, you wouldn't worry about that being raveling, because the Shannon Cuddle or Minky is made out of polyester, and that's not gonna ravel. But here, this is a napkin, it's made out of cotton, it's gonna be washed hopefully over and over again, and it'll last if you turn those edges in. So you're gonna see why, we remember when we sewed from the corner and then we stopped before we got to the edge. This is why we stop before we get to the edge, because you want there to be a little extra room there to turn that end under. All right, so you're gonna turn that edge under. And if I had not stopped there, it'd be really, really hard to negotiate that inside corner. All right, so we're gonna press that all the way around. We're going to turn that under, and that gets turned under about 1/8 of an inch, a generous 1/8 of an inch, all the way around that inside, and it's going to make a really nice border. So I'm going to finish pressing this, and then we'll come back as soon as I get back to the sewing machine. Okay, so now I've got these edges all turned under, and I'm going to start somewhere along the edge. I'm not going to start at the very corner. Okay, that's just too hard to do that. So start at the edge, don't start in the corners. And I've got my handy dandy tool here. It's actually a wooden round toothpick, and I love to use these because they make a nice clean, see how nicely that turned that end under? When I needed that end to be turned under, I just rolled that along like that. Now I'm going to tell you what to do in terms of where to stitch from the perspective of how I tell my little 12-year-olds when I'm teaching them how to sew. Imagine that this is a cliff. You want to go and stand or walk as close to the edge of that cliff as you can without falling off. Well, that's how you want to sew. You want to sew as close to that edge as you can without falling off. And the reason for that is, you remember you didn't turn very much under. It was a generous 1/8 of an inch. We didn't turn that much under on here, right? So we're only going, we don't want that popping out. We don't want that to pop out when you're using it. We don't want it popping out in the wash. So again, now we're coming up to a corner, and I'm going to smooth this under with this, using this like a stylus. I don't like to use metal when I'm sewing, because if you use metal, that pin could hit, your needle could hit that piece of metal, and that piece of metal is going to break and fly off and hit you in the eye. So now I'm coming up to my corner. I'm going to stop right where that seam is, and I'm going to turn, pivot, and I'm going to make sure that that's turned under neatly with my toothpick. The thing about a wooden toothpick or a wooden skewer is that it's kind of rough, and so it kind of grabs at the fabric, sort of. It's a lot easier than using something metal to turn things under. So here we go. So we're turning this under. Now, if you wanted to make this border wider, you could do that, but then keep in mind that when it comes over, you're going to lose even more of your design in your panel. You're going to lose more of that. It's going to be covered. So keep that in mind when you're sewing these, that if you're framing that out and you're bringing it around 1 inch, you're losing that little bit of a edge. Okay, so now I'm going to continue to go around. This is pretty straightforward. I like that this fabric has some glitz to it. You could do this in any size. It doesn't matter. It can be a luncheon size. It can be cocktail size. Cocktail napkins are nice. I think more people have people over for drinks than they do for dinner, and it's just kind of fun to have something really pretty to put under your glass. Almost done here. Okay, so we're coming up to that last corner, and I'm staying right at the edge without falling off the cliff. because these, you want to wash these over and over again. You don't want those edges turning out. And here I'm at the very end. I'm going to back stitch 1 or 2 stitches and I'm done. All right. Now, trim, trim, trim those threads. And there you have a really pretty luncheon napkin that you can use for years to come. There's the back, there's the front. You can fold it up or leave it open. Fold it this way. Your fork and your utensils on one side of the plate. Isn't that pretty?